Yes, Sir Keir Starmer has revealed all. A hard-hitting column in the Sun newspaper today. He is going to smash the gangs.
Nigel Farage has long been a prominent figure in British politics, known for his fierce rhetoric, charismatic presence, and relentless opposition to what he perceives as the failures of the establishment. In recent times, Farage has turned his attention to Prime Minister Keir Starmer, focusing on one of the most divisive and emotionally charged issues facing the UK: immigration. Farage's criticism of Starmer came to a head when he blamed the Prime Minister for not only mishandling immigration, but also for being at the root of the anti-immigration riots that have erupted across the country. Farage's argument is that Starmer's failure to address the immigration crisis from the outset has led to the tensions and frustrations that have boiled over into violence. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. In Farage's view, Starmer represents the kind of political leadership that is out of touch with the concerns of ordinary people. He argues that the Prime Minister, a former human rights lawyer and the leader of the Labour Party, has taken a soft stance on immigration that does not reflect the desires of the British public. Farage has long contended that the majority of Britons want stricter controls on immigration, both to preserve national identity and to prevent the strains on public services that come with unchecked migration. For Farage, the recent anti-immigration riots are the inevitable result of years of political neglect, where leaders like Starmer have failed to implement the tough policies needed to restore control over the nation's borders. The scale and intensity of the riots have shocked many in the UK, but Farage views them as a symptom of a much deeper problem. He argues that the failure to solve the immigration issue has created a powder keg of resentment, particularly in working-class communities that have borne the brunt of the social and economic impacts of high immigration levels. According to Farage, these communities feel ignored by a political class that is more interested in appeasing international institutions and promoting progressive values than in listening to the concerns of their own citizens. Farage's condemnation of Starmer is therefore not just about the current unrest, but about a broader failure of leadership that he believes has been going on for years. Farage's critique of Starmer goes beyond immigration policy alone. He argues that the Prime Minister's leadership is emblematic of a broader crisis in British politics, where the gap between the ruling elite and the people they are supposed to represent has grown to an unsustainable level. Farage believes that Starmer's failure to take decisive action on immigration is part of a larger trend of indecisiveness and weakness that has characterized his tenure. In Farage's view, Starmer is not only failing to solve the immigration problem, but is also exacerbating it by refusing to acknowledge the scale of the crisis or to take the kind of tough measures that are necessary to bring it under control. One of Farage's key points is that the current immigration crisis is not just about numbers, but about the kind of society that Britain wants to be. He argues that mass immigration has fundamentally changed the character of many communities, leading to cultural tensions and a sense of alienation among native Britons who feel that their way of life is being eroded. Farage has often spoken about the need for the UK to regain control of its borders, not just to manage the flow of people, but to protect the country's cultural heritage and national identity. In his view, Starmer's leadership has failed to grasp this essential point, focusing instead on technocratic solutions that do not address the underlying concerns of the public. In Farage's analysis, the anti-immigration riots are not simply the result of far-right agitation, as some of Starmer's supporters have claimed, but are instead a manifestation of a deep-seated frustration that has been building for years. Farage points out that many of those involved in the riots are not hardened extremists, but ordinary people who feel that they have been pushed to the margins of society by a political system that no longer represents them. For Farage, the fact that these riots are happening now, under Starmer's watch, is proof that the Prime Minister has failed to understand the gravity of the situation. Farage also sees a wider geopolitical dimension to the immigration crisis. He has often argued that the UK's membership in international organizations like the European Union, before Brexit, and its adherence to global human rights frameworks have tied the hands of British leaders when it comes to controlling immigration. While Brexit was supposed to give the UK the freedom to set its own immigration policies, Farage argues that Starmer and his government have squandered this opportunity by failing to implement the kind of robust measures that are needed to stop illegal immigration and reduce the overall numbers of migrants coming into the country. In this sense, Farage's criticism of Starmer is not just about domestic policy, but about the Prime Minister's approach to Britain's place in the world. One of the most striking aspects of Farage's critique is his focus on the moral dimensions of leadership. Farage argues that true leadership involves making difficult decisions, even when they are unpopular, and standing up for the interests of the nation as a whole. In his view, Starmer has failed this test by prioritizing the opinions of a liberal elite over the needs and concerns of ordinary Britons. Farage contrasts this with his own vision of leadership, which is based on a clear set of principles: patriotism, sovereignty, and the belief in the importance of national borders. For Farage, the anti-immigration riots are a consequence of Starmer's failure to lead in this way, and they are a sign that the British people are losing faith in the political system. Farage's rhetoric on immigration and leadership is undeniably polarizing, but it resonates with a significant portion of the population. Many Britons, particularly those in areas that have seen high levels of immigration, share his concerns about the impact of migration on their communities and their way of life. For these people, Farage's message is one of empowerment, a call to reclaim control over their country's destiny in the face of a political class that they feel has betrayed them. Farage's attacks on Starmer tap into this sense of frustration and alienation, and they offer a narrative in which the Prime Minister is not just a weak leader, but an active contributor to the problems facing the country. At the same time, Farage's critique raises important questions about the nature of political discourse in the UK. His focus on immigration as the central issue facing the country reflects a broader trend in which debates about migration, identity, and national sovereignty have become increasingly central to British politics. Farage's arguments resonate not only because of the specific issue of immigration, but because they tap into a wider sense of unease about the future of the country in a rapidly changing world. In this context, Farage's attacks on Starmer can be seen as part of a larger struggle over the direction of the UK, with immigration serving as a proxy for deeper questions about identity, sovereignty, and the role of the state. Farage's focus on Starmer's leadership also highlights the challenges facing the Prime Minister as he navigates one of the most difficult periods in modern British history. The immigration issue is not only a policy challenge, but also a political one, and Starmer finds himself in the difficult position of trying to balance the demands of different factions within his party and the broader electorate. For many on the left, Starmer's approach to immigration has already been too harsh, with calls for a more compassionate and humane policy towards migrants and refugees. At the same time, many on the right, and indeed a significant portion of the public, are calling for much tougher measures to stem the flow of immigrants and restore control over the country's borders. Farage's attacks on Starmer reflect the difficulty of finding a middle ground on this issue, and they underscore the extent to which immigration remains a deeply divisive and emotionally charged topic in British politics. Farage's criticism also forces a broader reflection on the nature of political accountability. In blaming Starmer for the anti-immigration riots, Farage is effectively arguing that political leaders should be held responsible not just for their policies, but for the social consequences of those policies. This is a powerful argument, and one that resonates with many who feel that the current immigration system is unsustainable. Farage's point is that the riots are not simply the result of extremist elements within society, but are a direct consequence of the government's failure to listen to the concerns of ordinary people and to take the necessary steps to address those concerns. This raises important questions about the role of political leaders in managing social unrest, and about the extent to which they should be held accountable for the actions of those who take to the streets in protest. Farage has consistently argued that immigration, particularly uncontrolled immigration, represents an existential threat to Britain as we know it. For him, this is not simply about numbers or statistics. It is about the very fabric of British society. His repeated condemnation of Starmer as a weak leader who has allowed immigration to spiral out of control is designed to amplify public fear and frustration. Farage's narrative is compelling to those who feel that their communities have been irrevocably altered by immigration and that the government has been either unwilling or unable to address the problem effectively. At the core of Farage's argument is the belief that Starmer has prioritized ideological concerns over practical realities. According to Farage, Starmer and the Labour Party are too preoccupied with virtue signaling and pandering to progressive elites to recognize the true scale of the immigration problem. Farage asserts that this has led to a disconnect between the government and the British people. Starmer, in his view, represents a brand of leadership that is far more concerned with maintaining the good graces of international institutions and liberal intellectuals than with addressing the tangible concerns of ordinary citizens. One of the most damning aspects of Farage's critique is his claim that Starmer is not only complicit in the immigration crisis, but also directly responsible for the rise of tensions that have led to violent anti-immigration riots. These riots, Farage contends, are a natural consequence of a leadership that has ignored the warnings of those who have long been critical of unchecked immigration. For years, Farage and others on the right of the political spectrum have sounded the alarm about the social consequences of mass immigration. Now, in his eyes, these warnings have materialized in the form of public unrest. For Farage, this is not just a crisis for Starmer's government. It is a crisis of governance itself. The anti-immigration riots that have erupted in various parts of the UK are, to Farage, symptomatic of a government that has failed to listen to its people. He has repeatedly stressed that these riots are not simply the work of extremists, but reflect a deeper, more widespread anger that has been building for years. The government's inability to get a handle on immigration, coupled with what Farage sees as its disregard for the concerns of ordinary Britons, has created an environment where tensions were bound to explode. The riots in this context are a manifestation of the deep-seated frustration felt by many who feel that their voices have been ignored. Farage has been careful to frame his criticism of Starmer not just in terms of the current unrest, but as part of a broader failure of leadership that extends beyond immigration. He has argued that Starmer's approach to governance is fundamentally flawed, characterized by indecision, weakness, and an inability to grasp the true nature of the challenges facing Britain today. This critique extends to other areas of policy, including the economy, national security, and social cohesion. But it is immigration that remains the focal point of Farage's attacks. In his view, Starmer's inability to take decisive action on this issue is emblematic of a deeper malaise within the Labour Party and the political establishment more broadly. Farage's narrative positions him as a champion of the people, a politician willing to speak uncomfortable truths in a political climate dominated by what he sees as political correctness and the stifling of open debate. In contrast, Starmer is cast as a symbol of the establishment's failure to address the issues that matter most to ordinary Britons. Farage's message is simple. Britain is facing an immigration crisis, and the current leadership is incapable of solving it. In fact, Farage argues that Starmer's leadership has only exacerbated the problem by refusing to confront it head-on. Farage's rhetoric is particularly potent because it taps into a broader sense of disillusionment with the political system. Many people, particularly in working-class communities, feel that their concerns about immigration have been dismissed by a political class that is more interested in pandering to liberal elites than in addressing the real issues facing the country. Farage has consistently argued that these communities have been the most affected by immigration, whether through increased pressure on public services, changes in the social fabric of neighborhoods, or competition for jobs. For many, Farage's critique of Starmer is not just about immigration. It is about the perceived failure of the entire political system to respond to their needs. In this light, Farage's attacks on Starmer take on a populist tone, casting the Prime Minister as part of an elite that is out of touch with the realities of life in Britain today. Farage has long positioned himself as a man of the people, someone who understands the frustrations of those who feel left behind by globalization and mass migration. His repeated criticism of Starmer's immigration policies is designed to reinforce this image, presenting Farage as the voice of the ordinary Briton who is being ignored by the political establishment. This is a powerful message, and one that resonates with a significant portion of the population. The political implications of Farage's sustained attack on Starmer are significant. For one, it puts immigration back at the forefront of the national political debate, an issue that has the potential to divide the country deeply. Immigration has long been one of the most polarizing issues in British politics, and Farage's renewed focus on it ensures that it will remain a central topic of discussion in the coming months and years. By framing immigration as not just a policy failure, but a failure of leadership, Farage is challenging Starmer to either defend his record or make significant changes to his approach. Either way, the pressure on the Prime Minister is mounting. Another key implication of Farage's criticism is the way it challenges the Labour Party's traditional base of support. Labour has historically been the party of the working class, but in recent years it has increasingly been seen as out of touch with the concerns of many of its former supporters. Farage's focus on immigration taps into the anger and frustration felt by many working-class voters who feel that the Labour Party no longer represents their interests. By positioning himself as the voice of these disaffected voters, Farage is attempting to erode Labour's support in key constituencies. This could have significant electoral consequences, particularly in areas that have seen high levels of immigration and where the Labour Party has traditionally been strong. Farage's attacks on Starmer also raise important questions about the future of the Conservative Party. While Farage himself is no longer a member of the Conservative Party, his rhetoric on immigration has long resonated with a significant portion of the Conservative base. By attacking Starmer so fiercely on this issue, Farage is also implicitly challenging the Conservative Party to take a harder line on immigration. This puts pressure on Conservative leaders to respond to Farage's criticisms, either by adopting some of his rhetoric or by articulating a clear alternative vision for managing immigration. In this sense, Farage's critique of Starmer is not just a challenge to Labour, but to the entire political establishment. Moreover, Farage's attacks highlight the broader challenges facing British democracy. His repeated claims that the political system is failing to represent the will of the people tap into a growing sense of disillusionment with traditional politics. Many Britons feel that their voices are not being heard, particularly on issues like immigration, and Farage's rhetoric gives voice to this frustration. This raises important questions about the future of representative democracy in the UK, and the extent to which the political system is capable of responding to the concerns of ordinary citizens. Farage's focus on immigration also has wider implications for the UK's relationship with the rest of the world. Throughout his political career, Farage has been a vocal critic of international institutions and agreements that he believes undermine Britain's sovereignty. His attacks on Starmer's immigration policies are often framed in this context, arguing that the UK's failure to control its borders is partly due to its adherence to international obligations and agreements. Farage has consistently called for a more robust approach to immigration, one that prioritizes national sovereignty and the interests of British citizens over international commitments. This is a message that resonates with many who supported Brexit and who feel that the UK should have greater control over its own destiny. At the same time, Farage's critique of Starmer highlights the challenges of balancing national sovereignty with international obligations in an increasingly interconnected world. Immigration is a global issue, and the UK, like many other countries, is grappling with the pressures of migration flows, both legal and illegal. Farage's focus on immigration as a domestic crisis reflects a broader tension between the desire for national control and the realities of a globalized world. In this sense, his attacks on Starmer raise important questions about the future of immigration policy in the UK and the extent to which the country can or should isolate itself from global migration trends. Farage's relentless focus on immigration also serves to highlight the deep divisions within British society. Immigration has long been a contentious issue, and Farage's rhetoric often plays on the fears and anxieties of those who feel that their communities are being overwhelmed by newcomers. His critique of Starmer is designed to amplify these fears, presenting immigration not just as a policy failure, but as a threat to the very survival of British society. This kind of rhetoric is deeply polarizing, and it risks further entrenching the divisions that have already been exposed by the Brexit debate and other political conflicts in recent years. Nigel Farage's campaign against Keir Starmer over the immigration issue continues to gather steam, reflecting the deep undercurrents of dissatisfaction and division within the UK. What is clear from Farage's ongoing rhetoric is that his critique of Starmer extends beyond the immediate issue of immigration. It taps into a larger sense of discontent with the political class and the perceived erosion of national identity, sovereignty, and public trust. Farage's influence in British politics, despite no longer holding formal office, is significant, and his attacks on Starmer are part of a broader populist resurgence that threatens to reshape the political landscape in profound ways. A key aspect of Farage's critique is his emphasis on the cultural ramifications of immigration. For Farage, immigration is not just an economic or political issue, it is fundamentally about the preservation of British culture and identity. He has argued that mass immigration has led to a fragmentation of British society, where multiculturalism, in his view, has failed to integrate different communities and instead fostered division. This, he claims, has weakened the sense of a cohesive national identity, leaving many Britons feeling alienated in their own country. Farage's attacks on Starmer are framed within this broader cultural context, as he accuses the Prime Minister of failing to protect British traditions and values in the face of what he sees as an onslaught of foreign influences. Farage's rhetoric draws heavily on the notion of sovereignty, a theme that has been central to his political career since the days of the Brexit campaign. In his view, immigration is not just a symptom of poor governance, but also a consequence of Britain's loss of control over its own borders, which he blames on successive governments' willingness to cede power to international institutions. Farage has been a vocal critic of the European Union and more broadly, of any supranational body that he believes undermines Britain's ability to govern itself. Although the UK has left the EU, Farage argues that Starmer's government continues to adhere to policies that weaken national sovereignty, particularly when it comes to immigration. One of the most striking aspects of Farage's critique is how he frames immigration as part of a broader political betrayal. He portrays Starmer and the Labour Party as part of a globalist elite that is more concerned with maintaining international alliances and fostering progressive values than with defending the interests of British citizens. This message has found a receptive audience among many working-class voters who feel that their concerns about immigration and national identity have been dismissed by a political class that is increasingly out of touch. Farage's attacks on Starmer thus tap into a deep sense of resentment, not only toward immigration policies, but toward the political establishment as a whole. In recent years, this sense of political betrayal has been exacerbated by the perception that public institutions are no longer serving the interests of ordinary people. Farage has been quick to point out that many of the regions most affected by immigration are those that have historically been labor strongholds. These are areas where public services are often stretched to breaking point and where the impact of immigration is felt most acutely. Farage's message to these communities is clear. The Labour Party, under Starmer's leadership, has abandoned you. This narrative of abandonment is a powerful one, particularly in areas where economic hardship and social dislocation have made people feel that they have been left behind by the political system. In addition to focusing on the cultural and political dimensions of immigration, Farage has also drawn attention to the economic consequences of mass immigration. He argues that large-scale migration has placed an unsustainable burden on public services, including healthcare, education, and housing. Farage frequently points to the strain on the National Health Service, NHS, as an example of how unchecked immigration has stretched public resources to the limit. He contends that this is not just a problem for those who are new to the country, but for British citizens who are struggling to access the services they need. By blaming Starmer for failing to address this issue, Farage is framing the immigration debate not just in terms of cultural preservation, but as an issue of fairness and resource allocation. Farage has also touched on the issue of jobs, arguing that immigration has depressed wages and increased competition for employment, particularly in low-skilled sectors. This is a particularly sensitive topic in areas that have seen significant deindustrialization, where well-paying jobs have been replaced by lower-wage positions in service industries. For many people in these areas, immigration is seen as a direct threat to their economic security, and Farage's message that Starmer has failed to protect British workers resonates deeply. This economic angle allows Farage to broaden the appeal of his critique beyond the traditional concerns of the far right, reaching out to a wider segment of the population who may not necessarily be opposed to immigration in principle, but who feel that the current system is unfairly disadvantaging them. Another important dimension of Farage's attack on Starmer is the security angle. Farage has repeatedly linked immigration to concerns about crime and national security. arguing that the government's failure to control the borders has allowed dangerous individuals to enter the country. This aspect of Farage's rhetoric plays on the fears of terrorism and other forms of violent crime, suggesting that the failure to implement stricter immigration controls has made Britain less safe. While these claims are often controversial and have been criticized for stoking fear and division, they have nonetheless found an audience among those who are concerned about the impact of immigration on public safety. Farage has also linked the immigration debate to broader concerns about political correctness and free speech. He has argued that the reluctance of politicians like Starmer to take a harder line on immigration is a reflection of a wider culture of political correctness that stifles honest debate. According to Farage, political leaders are afraid to speak out about the negative consequences of immigration for fear of being labeled racist or xenophobic. This, he argues, has led to a situation where important issues are swept under the rug and the concerns of ordinary people are ignored. Farage's willingness to tackle these issues head-on, even at the risk of controversy, is one of the reasons why his message continues to resonate with a significant portion of the electorate. In this context, Farage's critique of Starmer is not just about immigration policy, but about the broader culture of political discourse in the UK. He accuses Starmer of being part of a political elite that is more interested in virtue signaling and protecting its own interests than in engaging with the real issues facing the country. Farage's populist message is that political leaders like Starmer have lost touch with the concerns of ordinary people, and that they are more concerned with protecting their own reputations than with solving the problems that are affecting the country. This sense of alienation from the political class is a powerful force in modern politics, and Farage has been able to tap into it with great success. Farage's attacks on Starmer also highlight the growing polarization of British politics. The immigration debate, in particular, has become deeply divisive, with stark differences of opinion between those who favor a more liberal approach to immigration and those who want to see stricter controls. Farage's rhetoric reflects this polarization, as he positions himself as the champion of those who feel that their voices have been silenced by a liberal elite. In doing so, he further entrenches the divide between those who see immigration as a positive force for diversity and economic growth, and those who view it as a threat to national identity and social cohesion. At the same time, Farage's attacks on Starmer raise important questions about the future of immigration policy in the UK. While Farage's rhetoric may resonate with a significant portion of the population, it is unclear how sustainable his proposed solutions are in the long term. Farage has called for much stricter controls on immigration, including tighter border security and more rigorous enforcement of immigration laws. However, implementing these policies would be a complex and potentially costly endeavor, and it is unclear whether they would address the underlying economic and social factors that drive migration. Moreover, Farage's focus on immigration as the central issue facing the UK risks overshadowing other important policy areas. While immigration is undoubtedly a major issue, it is not the only challenge facing the country. Issues such as the economy, healthcare, education, and housing are all deeply interconnected with the immigration debate, and focusing too narrowly on immigration risks neglecting these other important areas. Farage's attacks on Starmer, while effective in mobilizing support among certain segments of the population, may ultimately contribute to a more fragmented and polarized political landscape, where complex issues are reduced to simple slogans and sound bites. Farage's sustained attacks on Starmer also highlight the broader challenges facing the Labour Party as it tries to navigate the immigration debate. Labour has traditionally been the party of the working class, but in recent years, it has struggled to reconcile its progressive values with the concerns of many working-class voters who feel that immigration is undermining their economic security and social cohesion. Starmer's leadership is caught in this difficult balancing act, as he tries to appeal to both the progressive base of the party and the working-class voters who feel that Labour no longer represents their interests. Farage's attacks on Starmer exploit this tension, highlighting the difficulties that Labour faces in addressing the immigration issue in a way that satisfies both its progressive supporters and its traditional working-class base. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, Do you agree with Nigel Farage's criticism of Keir Starmer's leadership? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.